Okay, now hopefully you can all hear me. I definitely hope so. Checking, checking. All good. I wonder how much of that you actually caught. I did a big welcome to all of you to the Africam show and reminded you that we're live and interactive, as usual. And I was telling you that I've just got some water to accompany me this time round, but who needs anything else when we get to explore the African bush together? But, I'd love to hear how you're enjoying the Africam shows. So today, I thought that we could maybe talk a little bit about the different roles that animals play in their environment. Of course, I will be taking my lead from all of you. If you have questions, send them through. But I've just been thinking about it a lot more recently, kind of the more nitty-gritty of how animals shape their environment. And the more you think about it, the bigger it becomes. And not just in terms of how animals are shaping their environment, but also the planet as a whole. And I'll try not to take us into a rabbit hole, but hey, it happens sometimes. Remember when we went down a rabbit hole about the word pied? I loved it. Anyway, before we get going, let's do a few hellos. Bridget McKenney, hello. You say, hi Trish. You've got your iced tea with lemon today. Love it. Very good choice. I would probably go for warm tea in my condition here in Cape Town, because being in Cape Town in winter should be considered a condition. Amber Co, you say happy Tuesday. Thank you to Trish for being here. You're having coffee and chocolate donut. Oh, that sounds like a good combination. And you're here to enjoy the show. Kauru, you say hi Trishala. Hi Kauru. Aussie Jan 2, you say afternoon break one and all. Or good afternoon coffee break. And then Timber Grace, you say good morning from windy and warm Minnesota. You've got your Diet Coke this morning and you're excited for the show. Nice to hear it. Dear NC, you say good morning from Seattle. All ready with your coffee and a smile. That's all I need, really, for you to begin exploring and learning about our wildlife here in Africa. Is the curiosity and a smile. That'll do. Although having a Coke or a coffee or a tea, that's always good. Suki V! Hi Suki V! You say hello to all. Tris Visop, you say good day everybody. Cool water in hand and you're ready for the show. Rolling Trouble, you say hello all. You're a little late. You're rolling in late. Rolling Trouble. There was something there. I almost caught it, but then I didn't. But I still chuckled to myself. Anyway, I usually don't have a particularly rigid plan when it comes to the Africam shows on Tuesday, because I like to take my lead from all of you and talk about the things that you want to talk about. But like I said, I've just been thinking about ecosystems recently, probably in a bit of a weird philosophical way, but it all comes down to the science anyway, whether it's the philosophical types of sciences, which yes they are, or the actual natural sciences, the biology. And with elephants, we're watching these elephants, or this elephant bull right now at Aldonio. Can you tell what he's doing? We've seen elephants do this at Aldonio before. He's twisting his trunk to get in just that perfect position so that he can create a suction over that little spout that feeds this water hole. And it's a tiny little thing. But he's making sure he gets his trunk right over to be able to suck it up. But elephants, well, we know that elephants are picky when it comes to their water. Sometimes dams are just not good enough, especially not in the dry season. Whether it's a particularly dry winter or not doesn't really matter, because even if there is water in a dam, eventually, I mean, it's just like cooking soup, right? At some point, the water evaporates and all the flavors get concentrated. Now, in a similar but slightly less tasty way, a similar thing happens at the dam. So water is evaporating, even though there is still water in the dam, and everything that's existing in the water kind of just gets more concentrated and more concentrated, which I would imagine, and I'm sure you would too, it's not very tasty. So elephants will go off and they'll dig holes. You might have seen that in some of the cameras. They'll dig holes kind of close to dams and also in riverbeds. So basically any area where the water table can be higher. So they're not going to be digging in areas like crests. And again, thinking about the way that they shape their environment, I mean, elephants are called the engineers of the bush, the architects of the bush, the gardeners of the bush. They have many, many jobs. And that's just because their large size makes their ability to shape an environment a little easier, or rather, easier for us to see. And so elephants go around in these areas where the water table is quite high, or closer to the surface, and then they dig little holes. And those little holes don't just serve the elephants, because as they dig, it fills up with the fresh water or groundwater, and then they drink from it. But then that creates opportunities for other animals to meet their moisture requirements too, even though other animals are not as fussy as elephants. But they're creating, as they're going about just taking care of themselves, they're creating opportunities for other animals too. I mean, as they dig, they might also be releasing buried seeds in that riverbed, allowing them to be exposed a little bit more, and perhaps even help them sprout. Oh, Sukivi, that's an awesome question. You'd like to know what happens to the ecosystem now that 80% of Pilanesberg has burnt. And then Bob from Kalamazoo, you also say, hi Trish, hi Bob, always like to hear your name. You say, smoke at Kwamaratan, wildfire or controlled burn. Let's go over and have a look. Alright, so we're looking over now at Kwamaratan. That's not a controlled burn. So it was a wildfire, and it actually seemed to, at least from what I read, happened in two parts, and both were caused by human actions. One was somebody starting a braai or a barbecue, and the other one was at a resort close by, where a kitchen started in one of their fires. A fire started in one of their kitchens. So let's think about the ecosystem. What would happen now? So let us also keep in mind, and it's always important when we talk about the environment and habitats, that when we try to preserve and conserve, we are doing that for the benefit of ourselves and for the wildlife that already exists. Because the planet has gone through periods of drought and fires like we cannot imagine, and the planet always recovers. Look at that, still smoldering. But it's large-scale events like this, I suppose in the grand scheme of things this isn't really a large-scale event, but it's events like this that actually restart the environment a little bit. So I'm going to start with the positives. Around this time of year, it's pretty windy in certain places, and apart from that, the first rains haven't come yet. So that means that there's a lot of fuel around. Dry grasses, you see them in these bundles, kind of all collapsed, fallen over. That's all fuel. And that's what allows wildfires to spread so easily. And that's why, like you were asking, Bob from Kalamazoo, is it a controlled burn? That's why controlled burns are important, because it reduces the fuel load in an area. Now, I don't know whether in this area, this part of the Pilanesberg, whether they had done any controlled burns recently, but considering the extent of the fires, I doubt it, or perhaps they didn't do enough. And fires are a natural part of wild spaces on this planet. Not even wild spaces, any space on this planet. Fires are something that have been happening for millennia. I mean, far more than that, actually. So environments know how to recover. Now, the problem is that anything that needs to recover from something needs time. And the smaller habitats get, the more pressure that's put on habitats, the less that time becomes. And so it can't recover as well. But it does mean that that dead grass and dead foliage, it's now burnt out, which creates opportunity for new growth. So grass grows, and I'm going to just focus on grass here for a moment. Grass grows like your hair. So it grows from the bottom up. So the parts that are right at the end, that's the old bits. That's different to the way a tree grows or a shrub grows. They grow from the very tips. So as the branches grow out and the stems grow out, it continues to grow from that point, not from way down at the bottom. So once grass gets really big and falls over itself, it ends up blocking light to the bottom growing bits, and it can essentially die under its own dead weight. So a fire comes through and just clears all of that. But that's just the positive of it. Also, usually large-scale events like fires and floods in an area, and even droughts, they come in cycles, and usually there is a certain cycle in that area. For example, where I grew up in South Africa, in Durban, there's an 11-year cycle for floods. And that's just because of the climate. So remember, climate is large scale. When we talk about the weather, we talk about every day. But when we talk about the climate, we talk about what's happening over really long periods of time, patterns. So fires are periodic and are also part of the landscape. And I mean, like you say, Zygote, you say that's very sad, but you're sure it will recover. It definitely will recover. But it doesn't mean that we should forget about the losses that happen during this time. Now, I'm not sure the extent of the damage to wildlife, but I'm betting that a couple of mammals got severely burned, because it just makes sense. But that's just megafauna. That's just things that we get to see easily. But what about all those little things? And we're talking about ecosystems, right? So all those things that are estivating at this point, at least. So things like reptiles, like tortoises, they kind of find a little spot, maybe in the banks of a dry riverbed, something like that. They probably took the brunt of this. Those and insects, things that burrow in the ground. Now, during winter or this dry season, you don't see a lot of insects, but that doesn't mean they're not there. There's certain ways that insects can survive the dry season. One, they could be in a stage of their life where they don't have to go out very much, like an egg. They could die off during this time. They could be kind of dormant during this time, which is possible as well. But being an egg or being dormant during this time still means that you're vulnerable to what's happening in the environment, even if they're not active. So I think that they would have gotten the brunt of this fire. Bridget McKinney, you say, don't fires activate some seeds? Yes, they do, but they do that in areas where fires are very much part of the natural environment, very much part of the ecosystem. For example, here in the Western Cape, where I live, fires are necessary, for example, for proteas to germinate. But in the bush, not so much, because it's not an area that's characterized by periodic fires every year or two. And that might actually be because we've modified the environment to protect from those kinds of things. So in our efforts to conserve, sometimes we modify in ways that we don't expect. But you're right, there are some seeds that will germinate thanks to fire. Ooh. And I feel like I have so much to say, but let's quickly go through a few more hellos. And then we can maybe move over to another cam. Jirel, you say hello and you can hear me and you've got your delicious coffee and you're happy to be here. Rolling Trouble, you say woohoo, you've got your coffee on. Zygote, you say namaste, namaste to you too, Zygote. Teddy Lad Lulu, oh I like that. You say good afternoon from Cheshire, UK. Very nice. Ooh, interesting. Andy, we'll just take this. Actually, maybe Andy, I'll answer your questions when we head out. Your question when we head back up to maybe El Doño to watch the elephant. But let's see if we can have a look. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Rolling Trouble, you also say fire cleans things up. It does clean things up. And there are losses during that time, but it allows for regeneration, for new growth to come through. And yes, it can be devastating and harmful to wildlife, but that is especially a problem in areas where reserves are fenced and closed, because wildlife doesn't have anywhere to go. Anyway, Andy, you would like to know, do elephants have taste buds inside their trunk, or do they smell when they decide what water is fit to drink? So, their trunk is just the nose and upper lip fused. So they can definitely smell, but they're not tasting through their trunk. What they do have, though, is a Jacobson organ or a vomeronasal organ that's in their palate. Now you and I, we don't have that anymore, or at least not as it used to be. And what a vomeronasal organ is imagine in the palate of elephants, and we'll speak about elephants since you asked about them, there's little holes, and those holes are filled with a jelly-like substance. And so when we smell something, we're actually smelling the particles in the air. Now I know that may be nice if you're thinking about smelling flowers, but if you're thinking about the smell of other things, that's not the nicest thing to imagine, because those are literally particles of that thing going up into your nose. So anyway, once those particles, which are, little molecules, once they hit that vomeronasal organ on the palate, they hit those little tubes that are filled with gel. And then the little tubes that are filled with gel, they amplify that molecule. And then it gets sent to the brain. So it's kind of like putting a microscope on a smell and then sending it to their brain. And that's why they're really able to pick up on whether they like the water, they don't like the water, even before tasting it. In fact, they can do the same thing for leaves on trees. So we know that as a defense, leaves will send out, or plants will send out tannins to make the leaves not so tasty when they feel that they're being attacked by a herbivore. Feel is not the right word there, but you get my drift. The other thing they can do is send out volatile compounds. Volatile compounds just mean something that can evaporate easily. They send that out as a message to other plants in the area to say, hey, you know what, I'm being eaten by a herbivore. You should probably put your tannins out now. Elephants can smell that, and we call them pre-digestive cues. So elephants can smell that, hey, this plant is a little bit too tanniny. I don't know if I feel like eating that today. So they have a very sensitive sense of smell. And it's not just thanks to the vomeronasal organ. It's also because they have a well-developed olfactory system, which is the system that deals with your sense of smell and you being able to categorize those smells or to create information from that smell. April Owl, you say hi, late but happy to be here. April Owl, you've jumped in at a time where we're talking very serious business today. it feels like, when was it, on Thursday when we were doing Wild Moments with Taylor, I felt like we could hardly talk about anything because we were, us as in the Africam community, we were chatting so much amongst ourselves, which is lovely. But today it feels like, we're down to business. Bridget McKenney, you'd like to know, why do elephants lose the cartilage in their ears? That's an interesting question, and to be very honest, I haven't done enough research on it. And I should. And that's also why I think I really enjoy you guys asking these kinds of questions, because sometimes we take it for granted. For example, Mindy Tillopal, a couple weeks back, maybe even more, asked me about the muscles in an elephant's trunk, and I hadn't thought about it in such a long time, and I'm so glad that I went and revisited that information. And I think I'm going to do the same here, Bridget, because I've seen elephants with a floppy ear many a time. I've seen calves with floppy ears too, which, if I had to just, throw out educated guess, I would say that that kind of defect is birth-related, so I'm not sure if it's genetic, but I can't tell you why. It's a feeling. I feel like it's more developmental at a fetal stage, but I need to do more research. But if we're talking just structurally, cartilage is very strong, but at the same time it's not the same as bone. And if there is an injury to an elephant, then it can collapse quite easily. But I'm going to read more about that. I've also heard things like floppy ear syndrome, and I remember being taught about that when I was just starting to guide, but it definitely needs a revisit, and we will do that. There he goes, still after that little spout, all the good water. I remember some of you were telling me that sometimes there's a line here at Old Donyo for that particular spout. I think that really speaks to their preferences. So we spoke about ways that elephants are influencing the ecosystem, and the one thing we did speak about was how they dig holes, and those holes fill up with water, and that allows for water for other animals too. But also they eat very much. They're constantly eating. They've got to keep up that massive size. And when they're almost indiscriminately just eating all the vegetation around them, they're also consuming seeds. And we are talking about seeds germinating with fire, but what also helps seeds germinate is softening that hard exterior of seeds. So seeds have this very rigid kind of casing, and that's to protect the seed, but once it goes through the digestive system, it kind of loosens that up a little bit. So that makes germination a little easier. Oh, is there another elephant coming? See how his body language changed? What did you see? Did you see he lifted himself up? His ears went out a little bit. Could it have been these helmeted guinea fowl that caused the problem? I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest. So elephants, in one pile of dung, as many as 20,000 different seeds have been counted. That's huge. That's massive. And so they consume their food here, and then they walk another 10 kilometers, and then they defecate. So their seed disperses as well. There we go. That's what he was reacting to. Another elephant. All friendly now, though. Apart from the seed dispersal and the digging for water, also their massive size allows them to clear paths. So that's why they're called the engineers, the architects, the gardeners. They're very busy, elephants, much like guinea fowl, busy in a slightly different way. I'm not going to compare intelligence because I feel that it's incomparable unless you have a specific test that you're doing across all species, which is pretty much impossible. But I feel like guinea fowl are maybe preoccupied with the smaller things, like scratching around, fighting for roosting spots, things like that. Tris Visop, you say you read recently that catfish have taste buds all over their skin, and you're not sure if you would like it. Yes, they do. Even their little, not whiskers, but their little barbs, they can detect even the smallest vibration. Because remember, catfish are predators. You know, they're not going after the large things, they're not a crocodile, but they're still predators. So they need adaptations to help them to detect their prey most effectively. But I'm also not sure I would enjoy taste buds all over my skin. There's some really crazy adaptations out there. I mean, talking about skin, there's a group of worms called caecilians. Not from the Italian island, but they are a group of worms called caecilians, and so you know how mammals, we produce milk for our young, which I think is the most amazing thing, because it means that you can actually feed your new child from your body, which is amazing. Anyway, caecilians also feed their own children from their body, just not by milk. They keep them in their skin, and then the little worms eat their mother's skin. And that is their first meal and their nutrition for the first few days as a brand new caecilian. Plenty of crazy, crazy adaptations out there in the animal kingdom, and I love it. I really do. There's some weird stuff out there, but every weird and wonderful piece, niche, job, role in an ecosystem, whatever you want to call it, it's necessary for things to function as they do. And then, you know, that brings in, I remember I said to you that it kind of becomes philosophical when we think about these things, because at the same time, it is that way now. And us humans, we're just a tiny little blip. And the environment is constantly changing. So when we conserve, are we conserving things so that they can remain as they are now? And how do we allow the environment to still do what it needs to do? But anyway, that's not about conservation. That's more about the philosophy behind all of that. And think of niches. And I kind of like this analogy. It's a really simple one. But niches are like a puzzle. An ecosystem is this giant puzzle, and each one of the niches in the animals are a puzzle piece, whether it's big or small, and the different shape they have, that's their role, the niche that they fill. And if one of those things are removed, whether it's big or small, it changes the shape of the puzzle. And an animal like elephants, they're special. They're a keystone species. So it means that they're like the glue that holds the whole puzzle together, because they affect the ecosystem so much. Anyway, on that note, I feel like I've spoken a lot today. But it's time to say goodbye. I hope that you learned something. I hope you have a smile on your face knowing that caecilian little babies eat their mom's skin. You know, whatever puts a smile on your face. I hope that you enjoyed this Africam show. But it's time to say goodbye, and I'll see you all soon.